Good morning. Welcome. My name is Kristen Van Hook. I'm with the National Institute for Excellence in Teaching, and thank you for being here today. We're pleased to share this report, Performance-Based Compensation, Design and Implementation at 6 Teacher Incentive Fund sites. It reflects the firsthand experience of a number of educators here on the panel today, and we're looking forward to a lively conversation. These projects illustrate the variety of ways that performance-based compensation can be used to ensure that students in high-need schools are taught by effective teachers and leaders. But they're also about far more than just performance pay. For example, as states and districts design new evaluation systems that include student growth measures, these educators have several years of on-the-ground experience designing and implementing these systems. They also have experience in fielding reforms that provide information about performance, but are also designed to help improve teacher and leader work. With support from Joyce and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundations, we made a quick look at the first 2 cohorts of TIF grantees. Dr. John Eckert, who will moderate the panel today, currently a professor at Wheaton College, and with knowledge of TIF from his work at the Department of Education and, more important, 10 years of teaching experience, was engaged to conduct the review and analysis. I'd like to thank John and the panel for taking their time today away from their schools, states, and districts to share with us their experiences. Thank you.
This is an exciting time in education. This fall, having an education documentary released in mainline theaters, something that I didn't know that we'd ever see. Time, Newsweek, news outlets devoting significant amounts of time to education. It's clear that there's a lot of interest in what's going on with education, especially with the Elementary and Secondary Education Act coming up for reauthorization. And the discussions can be sometimes contentious. There are a lot of strong opinions on both sides of things. But one thing that isn't particularly contentious is that effective teachers and leaders are the key to improving our schools. And so we have some of these effective teachers and leaders here today to learn from and see what's working in places around the country where they're trying some things that are different than have been done in the past with teacher incentive fund money from the U.S. Department of Education. So last spring, we received money from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Joyce Foundation to study design and implementation of teacher incentive fund sites around the country. In some ways, for me, this was a culmination of the last 15 years of my life as I've taught, been at the U.S. Department of Education, studied at Vanderbilt University, these issues about ways to better support and compensate teachers for the most effective use of their time in the service of student learning. And so the thing I'm excited about is having these people here today to talk us through not only how they designed their programs, but how they deal with the day-to-day implementation challenges that they come across in their different settings. And so the way we came to these 6 sites was basically internally 2 years ago, I did an analysis of the 33 2006-2007 TIF sites and came across some sites that seemed to be doing relatively well with their implementation. And there were some commonalities that started to emerge from these 6 sites. And so today, the paper that you have before you, in the first pages 2 to 4 of the report, you'll see some common themes that emerged from these sites. And so it's a particularly important time to discuss these themes because the federal government's just invested another $442 million in 62 different sites in 27 different states. So learning from people that are a few years down the road in this process will be tremendously valuable as we move this conversation forward in the next round of TIF and then on into ESEA reauthorization and beyond. So I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to hear from them. I'm excited to share these findings with you. We have a state and district level TIF project director. We have a charter school network CEO. We have a principal. We have a master teacher. We have a lot of expertise here on the panel that will hopefully help to move the conversation forward about what really works in this area, which needs to have good discussion because our students' learning and the outcomes for our students are something that we're all interested in improving. So The 6 themes here are, I'll briefly go over, and then I'm going to let each of the panelists touch on a component of this and tell you a little more about their location, are in the report, and they're in a much more abbreviated version here on the slides, just to put it all onto one slide for you. But in all 6 of these sites, performance pay was a part of a system-wide strategy that also included professional development, collaboration, and evaluation. So it wasn't done in isolation. The original TIF grants did not require that. They were just a performance-based attempt to pay teachers differently and principals. And these sites recognized that it probably needed to be more than that to drive change. Next, each school or district involved key stakeholders in their efforts, so the way they got people on board, the way they gained from their expertise. They didn't just go for teacher buy-in. They looked to bring in different stakeholders to get the different types of expertise that would help avoid major blind spots in what they were trying to design and implement. Performance pay was valued as a component of a broader emphasis on teaching and learning. So it wasn't just the performance bonus that they thought was going to drive the change, and the teachers and the principals in these buildings value it as that part, as a component of a broader emphasis on teaching and learning. Teachers were appointed to leadership positions and charged with overseeing instructional improvement and evaluation. These sites recognize that effective teachers are going to be some of the best people to improve teaching in a building. So give them time, give them positions in order to work with other teachers, and then reward them for the work that they do, and that is going to change the results and cultures inside of their schools and districts. The reform was folded into existing systems and objectives instead of being implemented in isolation. So wherever possible, where there was overlap with programs at the district or state level, their grant was able to facilitate some additional growth through those already existing vehicles and transform some of those to be more effective for their teachers. This is particularly important when we think about the financial sustainability of these programs, which is what we get to in the last point, as in the current economic climate, this can't be about layering more expense onto districts. It has to be about leveraging the best resources that a district has, which in many cases are its teachers and principals, in order to get more return on the investment that's being put into their schools. And so a number of these panelists can speak to this issue of creating a system where all of the resources are aligned to leverage the best results for kids. So this last piece, local and state funding was reallocated and/or secured to ensure the long-term financial sustainability of these new systems. It's a really important piece as we look to their grants, as their TIF grants will be ending in the next couple of years, the next year or two, depending on when they started their funding. They're looking ahead to how they keep the good parts and the effective parts of their programs in place and sustain them over the long term. So I'm going to start with a round of questions for our panelists. Then we're going to open it up. If you have questions, we have additional questions for them that panelists can jump in on and as they feel they have expertise to share. But I want to give them a chance to introduce themselves and some of the things that are working in their states and districts. So we're going to start with Dr. Roseanne Lopez, who's from Amphitheater Unified School District in Tucson, Arizona. She is a long-time teacher, administrator, central office administrator, and has the credibility and the trust to implement some of these kinds of programs. One thing that we find is a lot of these programs, in the case of most programs, they're as good as the people you have in place. She was able to get a lot of traction in her district because of who she is, and traveling around with her doing the research this spring, I was able to see her interact and get a sense from other people of why things were working in amphitheater. And so she had an initial challenge that many people would have found extremely daunting, but she saw as an advantage. She had 120 people that expressed interest in wanting to work on the design and implementation of their TIF grant. And so, Roseanne, if you could start us off by introducing us a little more to your district and how you navigated this potentially problematic implementation issue in your district.
Thank you, John. Amphitheater Unified School District, just to give you a little bit of a context, we're in Tucson, Arizona, and for those of you that don't know, it's about 120 miles south of Phoenix and about 60 miles north of the Mexico-U.S. border. So we have a lot of issues that we're dealing with right now. Our district's pretty large. We span 112 square miles, and we're over 115 years old. And for Arizona, that's pretty old. So we have a lot of things under our belt. Right now, we have about 16,000 students, and we have 20 schools. One of the challenges was we were only going to implement our TIF grant in 11 of those 20 schools. So immediately, we were going to have a kind of a divide of the haves and have-nots, if you will. And so that was pretty serious. The grant was very large for us. It was $29 million over the course of 5 years. And the teachers knew that they would have an opportunity for a $10,000 stipend or a $10,000 performance pay bonus if they met certain criteria. But we had to figure out what those criteria were going to be. So we went out to find out who would like to help to build this new system for us. We've had a long-standing career ladder program. It was over 20 years old. And so we already had a performance pay system in place, and people were comfortable with performance pay, or somewhat comfortable with performance pay, although we had never used directly a value-added student achievement model, which is something that this project is going to introduce. So surprisingly, but we had 120 people out of the 530 or 550 potential eligible participants in Project Excel. 120 of them volunteered to help us develop this project. And it could have been very daunting, but I saw it as a real opportunity, because one of the biggest issues with performance pay is trust, and how you can build that trust with people so that they understand what the base is, they understand where everything's coming from, and it doesn't seem like somebody's coming in from the outside and imposing something on them, particularly in our district, who for years, our district was a site-based managed district. And so they were very, very reluctant in many ways for a new project. But 120 people, so what do I do with them? We took the 120 people and we used every single person. And how we did it was we divided the group up into design teams, a design team for teacher compensation, a design team for school administrator compensation. One team looked specifically at student assessment. Our assessment process in amphitheater for Project Excel, the name of our project, also includes a classroom assessment component. It goes beyond the standardized test scores. So that group looked at the classroom assessment component. Another group looked at teacher evaluation itself, and so on. So we had design teams of about only 6 to 8 people per team, because beyond that it gets just a little cumbersome with larger committees. With the remainder of the people, we developed focus groups. And our establishment of our design was built somewhat on a business model, where the design teams would work on a particular aspect of the project. I would take it out to a focus group in a very structured setting, and I explained to them it would be like a new product sitting on the table, and here are the features of the product, and please react to this. You're not representing anyone. You're not representing an association. You're not representing your peers. You just react to this as you see it on the table. They didn't know what they were going to see when they came in the room. As a result, that focus group material went back out to the design teams, and those design teams took that information and actually made changes to the design based on the focus group, and then went back out to the focus group in sort of a cycle. This proved to be extremely effective, because by the time we were finished, 120 people out of the 530 plus, they already had the basis of what this was going to be. They already felt a part of it. And of course, also, you're already over critical mass. You're over 20%. So when we opened up for sign-on to the project, our original sign-on in all the 11 schools was 96%. So we have had a continued well over 90% participation rate in the project since its inception. In fact, it appears now that we're going to be able to actually shift over a lot of what we were doing with performance pay to this particular model, and away from some of our other older models. So we're very excited about how it all worked out.
So you can see Project Excel's had some nice results. They have actually used some of their own measures to get at this, and they've developed their own value-added model with one of their data experts in the district. So I'm going to switch now, though, to Mike Savage. He's a principal at Adelia Creek Elementary School in Dallas, Texas. He has to be one of the only elementary school principals in the country that arrives to work on his Harley-Davidson motorcycle. And he's had some tremendous success as a principal in Dallas. he is one of 27 TIF schools of the 36 Texas TAP schools. So they've implemented the TAP system in their district, and Mike's seen a lot of changes in his school because of that, and has been able to move his school from being the school in the district with the highest rate of office referrals and being nearly an academically unacceptable in the Texas rating system to an exemplary school in Texas. So the student results are there. The culture in his school has changed significantly. I'll just show you briefly. This is the Texas TAP school rating. This is not just Mike's school, but a number of Texas TAP schools. You can see that as each year of TAP progresses, the number of schools moving toward exemplary are increasing at a fairly steady rate. So that now, this is actually updated from the report with new 2009-2010 numbers. You can see how many schools are almost at that are at the exemplary rating, with a number of more coming closer with recognized, and definitely have moved significantly from where they were the year prior to TAP. So, Mike, if you could tell us how have TAP and performance-based compensation changed the composition of your staff and the culture of your school?
Okay, John, thanks. Composition of my school. When I came to my school, we had 55 teachers, and the teachers were in disarray. The school was in disarray. Everybody was having trouble with the principal, the school district, etc. So the district removed the principal and the assistant principal, and they brought me in. It was in March, right before the tax test. So my kids scored in science, they were at like 22%. We scored at 33% and barely made acceptable. So I had to do some house cleaning. And what I did was, and the district helped me with this, we asked people if they wanted to stay or leave. We voted on the TAP system. I decided that we were going to do the TAP system with the staff, and we got people in and out. So that summer I hired, I believe, 30-some people to the staff, and it took all summer to do that. Once we got them into the system, the performance-based compensation helped us with getting the hook, getting the people into the system and understanding it. But we did extensive study. We went to South Carolina and learned about TAP and learned how they did it, and we took measures from there. And then we went to a few conferences and learned more things about how to do the TAP system, because the TAP system is 4 components. One is multiple career paths, where you have career teachers who are teachers who just want to teach and do a good job in the classroom. Then you have mentor teachers, and these teachers want to also move up the ladder and learn, and also hopefully become master teachers. Then you have master teachers who basically run the program. And then you have ongoing applied professional growth, and basically that's what is called our cluster meetings. And what we have in there is we have teachers doing staff development once a week, where we take one of their planning periods to learn how to be better teachers. And then we do accountability, where we do observations, and we do 3 observations as opposed to the Texas system, which is called PDAS, Professional Development Assessment System. We do a rubric where we have different components, and in these components, we teach the teachers how we want them to teach. And so we go from a 1, a 3, or 5. A 1 is unacceptable, a 3 is proficient, and a 5 is excellent. So we work towards that. When we started in this system, we realized that we would have a difficult time moving up to a 5 if you tried to do everything in the components. There are 13 major components, like standards and objectives, what else? Motivation, questioning, etc. So when we started doing it, it made it difficult for us, and it was hard. We didn't know if we were doing it right. We kept coming back and forth. And so I wanted to set that area so you could see what it's about. But what really happened was it started a change in culture. The teachers saw that we were focused. They saw that we had a plan. They saw that we had a way of improving. After the first year, we went from barely acceptable to almost a recognized school. The next year, we went from almost a recognized school to exemplary school. So every 2 years, we had improved and improved. So the last 2 years, we have been exemplary. I talked to one of the ladies who had been at my school, and she is now the director of language arts in the district, and I said, what was the difference? She said, well, when you came in and you brought in performance-based pay and you brought in the TAP system, you brought order to the school. You brought us a way of growing and learning. And that's what our system does. It teaches the teachers how to grow and learn. And we use the information we get, and everything goes under data. We use data to determine how we're going to improve. We use data to look at our kids when we do benchmarks. We go down to the individual kid to make sure we put them in small groups to help them learn. We do what's called individual growth plans. It's an IGP. And when we do the IGPs, the teachers have their own goals to grow. It's not a gotcha. It's how can we help you improve. And then we do clusters, and that's where we learn about how to teach better. Teachers get homework in these clusters. They get things that they have to do better. And then the last part is evaluation. So at the end of all of this, and once everybody begins to learn and grow, they see that achievement. And the first thing that they get out of it is student growth. They love to see the student growth. And then once we have that, then on top of it, they get the compensation, and they like to be rewarded for the good work they do. And some people have said it makes us feel more like a professional because we are getting this performance-based compensation. And that's pretty much how we improve. We just worked systematically through our system and got everyone on board and worked. And right now, I have about a 92% retention rate in my school.
Thanks, Mike. Dr. Andrea Thomas Reynolds is the CEO of a charter school network, Algiers Charter School Association, in the West Bank area of New Orleans, Louisiana. And they have had some tremendous growth in their scores that you will see here. The value-added score of 5 and 4 and 3, I'll go through those just briefly so you understand what that actually means. This is also in the report. This is also updated with 2009-2010 data, so the chart in the report is actually not as current as this. But what that value-added score of 3 is means that in reading and math, their students are making at least a year of growth. A 4, it means they're 1 standard error above that year of growth, and a 5 is 2 standard errors above that year of growth. So basically, there's a lot of learning and growth going on in the 9 schools that Dr. Thomas Reynolds oversees, with all of them making at least a year of growth, and 8 of the 9 making substantially more than that. So we're going to let her talk a little bit about what she attributes that sustained growth to in her school. So if you could answer that, that would be great, Dr. Thomas Reynolds.
The Algiers Charter Schools Association is made up of 9 schools, again, located on the West Bank of Orleans Parish. We have 6 schools that are elementary and middle schools, and we have 3 high schools. Our schools started in 2005-2006 after Hurricane Katrina and developed as charter schools, which was the fastest way to bring the schools back online. As part of the charters, TAP was implemented and written in the charter as a goal to do, and that became one of the frameworks for our schools. Now, 5 years later, and you look back on the changes that have occurred throughout the schools, some of the changes that have occurred in Louisiana, and you look at the scores and you can see that the Algiers Charter Schools Association has made some tremendous gains with student achievement. One of the attributes that we contribute to that has been TAP and the Teacher Incentive Fund. With TAP provided a framework for our teachers to begin to understand how we would look at professional development, how that would be measured, but more importantly, it allowed for teachers to see that there were other avenues for growth for themselves. We have many teachers who desired administrative positions, but you also have teachers that did not want to fully be separated from the classroom setting or from the student teaching section. So by having mentor and master teachers, it provided them with an opportunity to take on additional roles without alleviating or being fully pulled apart from that area. Now, what has occurred, we've had teachers to move up in the ranks. Teachers that may have started out as a regular classroom teacher, moved to mentor, moved to master teacher, assistant principal, as well as principals within our system. So in essence, we've been able to grow our staff from within. The other piece is that with the TAP program, it allowed for teachers to begin to start to identify what skills, knowledge, and responsibilities that they were going to be evaluated on, how that then inputted into the classroom value-added achievement, and then also to the overall school achievement. So it wasn't just how that particular teacher is doing, but how you're doing by yourself, but also how you're doing as part of the group. And it's with that group culture piece that everyone began to get a true focus. Now, as I talked before, I mentioned that we have 9 schools. Each one of these schools have their own mission. But there's some components that's consistent across all of the 9 schools, and TAP, again, is one of them. From our school scores, what we've seen is that our teacher retention rate has also been very high. We attribute this retention rate of about 93% to the fact that we have incentives to keep our teachers there with the TIF award. We've also allowed for opportunities for our teachers, again, to grow from within and to give them some increased accountability and responsibility as well. We've also used the same premise with our principals. Just as our teachers are evaluated 4 times a year, we also have our principals who use the Val-Ed assessment. Within this Val-Ed assessment, that attributes to about 25% of the principal's evaluation. 50% of the principal's evaluation is based upon school-wide achievement, and then the remaining 25% is based upon how well that school is implementing TAP to the fidelity of the program. When you look at the principal evaluations as well as the teacher evaluations, that begins to provide the shape for how well a school is doing. One of the things that we are very well known for, we want to have strong teachers. We also believe that if the quality of what we're looking for in teachers is not quite there, then we also work with our teachers to help them through ongoing professional development or to really have some serious conversations about whether or not this is the best fit for them. This is very new in some respects, but our bottom line is that we have to bridge that gap that exists among our students. Some demographic background of our students, roughly 97% of our students are free and reduced lunch. And we also have a strong student population of minority students of about 95% as well. So it's a very challenging situation that we're in, but I do feel that we have the pieces in place that are working towards that, as evident with our scores.
That's great. Thank you. Dr. Amy Holcomb is the Director of Talent Development in Guilford County, North Carolina, in the Guilford County Schools. They just received additional funding through the next round of TIF, and they'll be expanding from 30 to 40 schools with their Mission Possible program. 8 of the current 30 Mission Possible schools have been funded through TIF, and they used a lot of their resources for recruitment and retention incentives that range from $2,500 to $10,000. And this was to fill high-need schools in Guilford County. Amy, if you could talk a little bit about how these recruitment incentives and TIF resources in general have helped to improve your schools, that would be great.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good morning. I'm here from Greensboro, North Carolina, Guilford County Schools, where we now have 122 schools. It seems that every year we add a couple more schools, so that's an update from the report. Of those 122 schools, 30 are current Mission Possible schools. And with the advent of the new TIF funding, we will be able to add, we thought 10, but we're offered the opportunity to bump that up to 20 new schools to join the Mission Possible program for a total of 50 out of 122 schools. So almost half of our district will now be involved in a performance-based compensation program. When Mission Possible started in 2005, that was 1 year before the first round of TIF was offered nationally. And between 2005 and present, our district has grown from 33% of our students qualifying for free or reduced lunch to now over 55%. So our district is getting poorer and poorer. And although it's a wonderful district with great resources and talent, it's something that has made our district increasingly more difficult to staff. And I would say that that poverty rate is not equitably distributed across the district. We have pockets of poverty that intensify and intensify each year. So in thinking about TIF and pay for performance systems, I think that what we see even across this panel is that each district has a different set of levers that they're adjusting to try to make this work to achieve the ultimate goal of increasing student growth. So while we all share the same ultimate goal, our individual issues are reflected in the design of our program. And for Guilford County Schools, because of some of the difficulties we had staffing certain schools, our major lever to pull was the recruitment lever. And prior to instituting this program in 2005, we had schools that went entire years without a single certified math teacher. All of the math courses in one of our high schools were taught by substitutes or were taught by teachers that held alternative certification in teaching, perhaps a degree in a related subject but not a teaching certificate. And there were other schools that went entire years with multiple subs all year long. So you may have 10 math teachers, 2 of whom are substitutes, 8 of whom are regularly certified teachers. So this was a problem, and these schools were suffering because of the lack of talent in them. The children were suffering. I can't imagine being the parent of a child who sat in a math classroom all year without a math teacher. It's a horrifying scene. And so our superintendent at that time brought that issue forward to the community and the board and said, we need a big solution here. This is a huge problem, and we have to do something drastic. We can't wait a couple more years, because if we wait a couple more years or if we implement something slowly, that many more students are going to suffer. And so what came out of that was a program that pulled on that recruitment and retention lever. And so the design of our program is 4-part. The major part is the offering of recruitment incentives to highly qualified faculty. Those recruitment incentives are not just offered the first year, but they're annually recurring. So I guess after you're there for a couple years, they become retention incentives. The second component is the offering of performance awards for achieving student growth as measured by value-added data. The third component is professional development. That's a combination of a foundational professional development program that's offered to all of the schools so that they share a common language. But then on top of that, we layer need-targeted professional development to help our teachers to develop the skill sets and knowledge that they need to be successful in their particular organizational environment, because even from school to school, the issues are very different. And then the final component were structural supports. In certain grade levels, we had reduced class sizes, especially in our Algebra 1 classes. We were able to reduce that student-to-teacher ratio to 20-1. So the design of our program was to meet our particular need, and that was to recruit and retain talent. And over the course of the Mission Possible program, the first year being fully locally funded, the past 4 years being TIF funded, and this final year TIF funded, we've seen tremendous improvements in the recruitment and retention of our talent. I'm proud to say that every single year we have started out the first day of school with 100% of our teaching positions in Mission Possible schools filled with highly qualified teachers, and that was unheard of before this program. So that alone is enough of an achievement to say that this program has been an advantage to our district's children. The second celebration is that our attrition rate at Mission Possible schools started out very high, and in the report you can see that in 2006, 2007, that's reported at, sorry, let me find, Mission Possible isn't broken out separately, 29%. In actuality, the year before, when it was just the locally funded schools, it was in the upper 30s, with some schools being even higher, up into the 40%. And after a few years of program implementation, our attrition rate actually dropped below that of the district. So the district was at 12.8%. Our attrition rate was 11.7%. And that exceeded any expectation even I had. We were just trying to meet the state average. That was our goal. But we exceeded the district average and the state average for attrition. And so that was definitely a point of pride for us in our district to be able to say that not only are these the toughest schools to staff, but the people who are here love teaching here, they love working here, they're staying here, and they're achieving results, because staying in a school doesn't do any good unless you're achieving results. And I wish that we had this year's data to show you in this report as well, because this year I think was the turning point for our student achievement, and we have made tremendous strides. Total percent proficient in some of our schools has gone from the lower 20s to the upper 40s. And while that's not an overall percent proficient that we want to stop at, it's huge growth over the past few years, and we know that that momentum will continue, especially with the awarding of the TIF Round 3 grant, which will allow us to add another 20 schools and gain additional momentum, and will help us district-wide to transition our pay-for-performance program from a targeted program, as you see in this model, with subsets of our teachers, to a school-wide model. So I think that we've been very responsive to the comments of people that we're trying to recruit and retain, and have recognized that the recruitment and retention goes beyond those that are receiving these incentives, and it goes school-wide, because you also need to retain your counselors, your administrators, your art teachers, your PE teachers. They're all part of the overall growth effort. And so I'm proud to say that in the 2011-2012 school year, we've taken a lot of the lessons learned that Jonathan has identified in a lot of these themes, and we've been responsive in designing a program that I believe is even stronger, and I'm excited to see the results 5 years from now.
Thanks, Amy. Next up, we have Claudia Perez, who is a master and now mentor teacher at Pan American Academy Charter School in Philadelphia. She's part of Pan American is part of a 11-school charter network, and they use Philly TAP, which is a version of the TAP program that they have adapted and used for their context in Philadelphia. Pan America is included in the growth that you see here in the report and then on this slide. Again, the baseline here is the 1 year of expected growth that you would expect to see in math and reading, and you can see every school in the network is exceeding that, with some exceeding it by significant levels, including Pan American. I'm really excited to have Claudia here because she can speak to the issue of how this is changing things for teachers and students in the school, because she's on the front lines of that. She was a master teacher for 2 years at Pan American, and now that she is rolled into a mentor teacher position, which in the way they do that, it means she's in the classroom 80% of the time, and then she has 20% of her time released to help other teachers, so that she keeps in nice contact with students and teaching, but then it also has the time to help support other teachers. So I have 2 questions here for Claudia that you can jump in on. How have these additional roles facilitated your growth as a teacher? And then how has your role in facilitating professional development and meaningful evaluation supported growth for teachers and students? So your individual growth, and then for those of other teachers and students.
Thanks, John. Well, Pan American Academy is a charter school in Kensington, Philadelphia. And Kensington is a pretty tough neighborhood in the city, that when other people ask you, where do you teach? And you say Kensington, they say, oh, good luck, you know. But the teaching there at this charter school with the TAP program has really changed the way I look at teaching and the way teachers at my school look at teaching. I was the master teacher for 2 years, and in that program for myself, not only was I helping other teachers with their teaching abilities and trying to find areas of refinement, an area that they could work on and do better, and an area of reinforcement, an area that they are doing well in, and encouraging them in that area, but I was also being assessed in my abilities as well. So it was a constant process of growth, not just for myself, but for other teachers. So I had the opportunity to really look at data for our school and learn about what was going on with our students in reading, writing, and math. Our school, it's only our 3rd year as a school, so we started with TAP from the beginning. It was a little bit different. Teachers did not vote on this. It came as part of the organization that started our charter, which is Congreso. And through that, the board had approved for us to implement TAP, and so all teachers who started at our school knew that we would be using this program. It has been a very difficult process, but one that has been very rewarding. And I keep saying process because this isn't something I feel that you can accomplish in 1 year. I believe that there's growth in every year, and it only continues to get better. One example of that is being a master teacher the last 2 years, I've gotten to evaluate a lot of the teachers. And we would be scoring teachers from the rubric from a 1 to a 5, 5 being the highest, 1 being the lowest. And the teachers would score, like many would get 1s and 2s, and we would question, what are we doing wrong? What do they need to know? And then the second year, we started seeing teachers scoring at 2s and 3s. And this year, we finished our first cycle of observations, and teachers were scoring 3s and 4s. So that's very exciting for us because we see that this coaching that mentor and master teachers are doing with classroom teachers is really having an impact, and that the teachers are taking more ownership also of their teaching and of the data that's coming from their classroom. It's not just about the pay, it's really looking at the whole. I think some of my colleagues here were saying about how it's this idea of a community. It's not just what's going on in my room, it's really what's going on in the entire school, and everyone thinking the same way. I also know there was an example of a teacher in our school who, in the beginning, her first year there, felt that it was so challenging, it was too much work. But in reality, it's taking all this information and just breaking it down and giving each teacher a focus. It's stuff that we do as teachers every day, thinking about it, but sometimes we just need to kind of work on it in order to make it a little bit better. So in areas such as standards and objectives that we use in the classroom, making sure that your objective is communicated to your students throughout the entire lesson, that you have an assessment that will check to make sure that they received the information they needed and that they were able to accomplish the objective that you had for them. So I see that this has been very powerful, not only for myself as a master teacher, but now for the classroom teachers as well. And now I'm a mentor teacher, so I went back into the classroom, and I have more interaction with teachers one-on-one, a smaller group of teachers, where I go in and work with them one-on-one, looking at their lesson plans, really looking at how they're planning it, what did they look at in the curriculum, how we can make it better. And it's not the kind of coaching that I received when I worked for the school district beforehand, before I moved to this charter school. Beforehand, you would be observed twice a year and get an unsatisfactory or satisfactory rating, and that would be it. I wouldn't know what I did well, I wouldn't know what I could have done better, and you just hoped for the best that you would be there next year. So I'm really excited about being able to be part of this program.
Thanks, Claudia. That brings us to Dennis Dodder. Dennis is the director of South Carolina TAP. There are 43 schools in South Carolina TAP. 29 of them are funded through TIF. Dennis has been a big part of the 3 rounds of funding that have come from TIF, equaling more than $80 million in funds coming from the Teacher Incentive Fund. Dennis has helped facilitate some excellent growth for teachers and students. Dennis works in the South Carolina Department of Education, so he has kind of a unique role here, and he supervises the state TAP schools, which is not a small task, as I found out driving all over the state with him for several days this spring, seeing what work he actually does in the state of South Carolina. Dennis, could you speak a little bit to the benefits of having a program like TAP connected to the state level, specifically with regard to evaluation, mentoring, and funding?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, John. Working for the department gives a totally different view. I started in TAP as an assistant principal in 2001 when we started TAP in South Carolina. And then since then got involved under the first TIF project. And then we received the first TIF project, we received funding under the second TIF project, and now receive funding actually with the third TIF project. So as John referred to our 43, we're now over 70, looking at probably having somewhere between 80 and 90 by the end of, or by the beginning of next year, as it relates to TAP schools. One of the things in looking at from the difference of being involved in a school and now being involved with it from the state level is the coordination of efforts. In South Carolina, one of our main missions over the last 3-4 years was to break down the silo mentality. The idea that everybody has their piece and everybody just talks about their piece, but the right hand and the left hand never know what each other's doing. So really, thanks to Dr. Jim Rex, our state superintendent, and the efforts of TIF, we've really started to combine all different areas, from the standards, the state standards, to our longitudinal data system, to our certification and evaluation, to our professional development and our ed leadership. And this was really reflected as we got together as a state department and we're working on the Race to the Top competition. With that, the conversations that were occurring based on what the research from TIF was showing and the coordination of efforts to ensure that our longitudinal data system is going to be able to not only fulfill the requirements that we have today, but fulfill the requirements of where we're going and what we're doing. TIF has been extremely successful in South Carolina, as you see by some of the data. 95% of our schools last year received a year's growth or more, with over 50% receiving 2 standard errors above a typical year's growth. So we have been very, very successful. And the schools that we work with have typically been the underachieving schools. Our average in our TIF schools are about 85% free and reduced lunch, very rural districts. Some of you may have heard of the Corridor of Shame in South Carolina, a video that really talked about the equity in funding. A lot of those schools are TAP schools and have really used TIF as a catalyst to be able to change the culture. And I think when you look at the power of having TAP at a state level is that we're able to coordinate all the resources. Having one person that is able to work with multiple districts in multiple pieces. The state of South Carolina, in our Race to the Top funding, we're creating regional centers. And having the strengths in regional centers to be able to then bring those resources to the schools and create regional experts to be able to work with the schools. Typically, the State Department has been seen as a monitoring agency. You know, whether it's Title I or Title II or any other programs that they have, it's typically, are you implementing the program the way it's supposed to? Well, through TIF, we're able to really kind of change that idea and that mindset into a more of a support agency, that we're here to support them. That you know, as John referred to, that we drive around a lot. We tend to. There are 4 people that support all of our TAP schools, and that's what we do. We drive around school to school and help better implement the model. And I think the key to it was the performance-based compensation at the beginning. When we first started, and I remember first starting it as a principal, everyone kept calling it merit pay. And everyone kept talking about the idea of merit pay. And we tried merit pay in South Carolina. And it was disastrous because it was completely subjective. I like you, you're going to get more money. I don't like you, you're not going to get more money. Well, with that, there were a lot to overcome. But because we're at the State Department and we're at a larger level, we were able to really get the same message out statewide and across rather than working in small pockets. And because of that, it became very successful very quickly. When we talked about the idea of performance pay, and it's not, we've even really got away from the idea of it's not a bonus, because you see a bonus as just getting extra money. This is designed for, you are going to be paid a performance stipend based on how well your school does and how well your students do and how well you grow as a teacher, and using that as a growth model. And that really has become the catalyst for a lot of what we've done at the state. South Carolina has designed a model called Palmetto Priority Schools, which are our lowest achieving schools, schools that are not achieving at the rate that they're supposed to. And they have used, they said that as you create performance-based compensation models or comprehensive reform models, that we would like you to use the model that has been created in TIF or something similar. So they really have identified with what we've done and being able to work with that. One of the things, you know, as John had mentioned, you know, in our state evaluation system, we are unique in the fact that we have one state evaluation system. All districts in the state must use the state evaluation system. So we're a little bit ahead of the curve on that regard. However, through TIF, we were able to really begin looking at a lot of different aspects of how this is going to work and using a model like TAP. TAP is a highly comprehensive model that has a very unique evaluation tool, which shows a considerable correlation to student achievement. So although that was not the state model, what we've done is we've been able to work together as a state system to ensure that TAP fulfills all the requirements as it relates to our state evaluation system, so that if a school chooses to do TAP, they fulfill all the requirements and do not have to do multiple evaluation systems. So as it's tied to certification and as it's tied to professional growth and recertification, TAP fulfills all those requirements throughout the state. And because we have a state entity working in the Office of Educator Quality and Leadership, we are able to make those decisions on a state level to then help school districts choose a model to move forward with. And even as we look at the reauthorization at ESEA and the evaluation systems, I think that's something that we've seen is even within a district, you can have our state system, which is we call ADEPT, and they use SAFE-T as an evaluation system, but you can also have a school working with the TAP model and use the TAP evaluation system, and both of them will work to enhance the student growth. So throughout all that, and I guess the last piece that I want to talk about was the sustainability piece, is that at the state level, we have access to a lot of the state resources. Now, TAP itself does not receive any state funding, but with that, we are able to work with the districts to talk about the funding mechanism and to work with the state funding that comes in to be able to say these are how these different areas are able to use. And because of that, we've been able to really change a lot of the mindset and kind of getting out of that thinking, the typical thinking of, I need to use this funds for this, I need to use this funds for this, because it was always done that way. And really be able to say, this is a model that has shown significant student achievement. And really, when we look at our comparative groups, our TAP schools are performing about 2.5 standard errors above our comparative norm. So schools just like ours were performing significantly higher. So with that, when they see that data and they see the different funding streams from the state, we're able to really coordinate all the state efforts and all the state resources to be able to say, if you use this funding stream, you'll be able to do X, Y, and Z and still be able to enhance your professional development and still fit within the performance-based model. And then with that, as the performance, as was alluded, it's really the hook. Is I'm willing to go out and try something different and try something change, because it's not going to detract from anything that I make, but it also can enhance. And as that, I'm willing to try more and work more, and then it becomes a wonderful reward of, you know what, I'm being recognized for the fantastic work that I do. And because we're at the State Department, we can really publicize that statewide and really have an audience that is a lot bigger than just our particular area.
Thanks. So we have several other questions for the panel, but I want to take a chance to open it up for your questions. We thank you for coming, and we want to give you honor that and give you a chance to ask questions either of the entire panel, or if there's specific people on the panel that you'd like to follow up with, we'd like to give you that opportunity now. Before you do ask your question, please wait for the mic, say who you are, where you're from, and then state your question. This is being videotaped, so for that purpose, that would be really helpful. If you have a question that you would like to ask, you are free to ask now. And I believe Stephanie has a mic in the back, so just let her know.
Hi, I'm Laurie Calvert. I'm a teacher in North Carolina, Asheville, North Carolina, and I'm a Department of Education, Washington Teaching Ambassador Fellow. And I have a question for any of the panelists about how you handle the value-added component in subjects that are not tested statewide. You know, in North Carolina, we only test statewide certain subjects. So how do you get the other teachers, you know, your attrition rates are so low now, and how do you get those other teachers buy-in, and how do you evaluate them? How do you put that component in their evaluation?
Well, also being from North Carolina, I'll take that. What we do is we use the value-added growth models for those that have test data only. And that's why Mission Possible started out only addressing those positions that were like English 1, biology, chemistry, mathematics. And we did not measure student growth for those courses for which there was no state standardized test. We did get some pushback from the other teachers that were not in tested subjects. And for that reason, we're making the transition after this TIF grant ends to a school-wide model. And so in our next iteration of a performance-based compensation system, what we're doing is still recognizing the individual value-added data growth indicators with performance incentives, but we've also included a school-wide growth incentive for the school reaching expected growth, high growth, and you're familiar with those terms. That's our North Carolina ABC accountability model that focuses on growth. So in our next version, yes, it will be school-wide, but in this version, it was targeted only at teachers of tested subjects. And we recognize that that was a climate issue that came through in our focus groups, in our interviews, in our surveys. And again, until you have some experience under your belt, you don't know which of those levers to push and pull and how hard. And so I think that we've been responsive to the messages and making the adjustments for the future.
Dennis and Roseanne, you guys also have addressed this issue, I know, at your site. So Roseanne, go ahead, and then Dennis.
In our district, the amphitheater in Tucson, we took a slightly different tack to North Carolina. We have a culture that we've developed that every teacher is responsible for the standardized test scores. And so that is very helpful. So regardless of what you teach, be it music, art, physical education, biology, you know, CTE, whatever it is that you teach, you're responsible for those core things of reading, writing, and math. And so what we did was all of our value-added measures are, every teacher that is in that particular ranking, they have a value-added measure used for the students that are in their class, and they get to choose whether we're going to look at math or reading for those kids. Because we believe that everybody teaches reading and everybody teaches math. It's just a matter of how you teach it within the context of the subject that you have. So the other part of it is that part of the compensation is based on your own students in your own classroom, and then part of the compensation is based on a school-wide model. We divided that money in half. So 50% of the compensation overall is for student achievement. Part of it is for classroom and part of it is for school-wide. We did that from the very beginning. The other thing that we put in that I mentioned real quickly before is the classroom assessment component, which falls into the classroom piece. We've designed our own classroom assessment model. It's a performance-based assessment, and so therefore, if you're in a situation, say you're the science teacher, you can develop your performance-based assessment, which usually has something to do with scientific experimentation, for example. And there are particular criteria that you have to use for that assessment, and you gather up that data. And we're looking at the quality of the assessment in that case, and not necessarily, although we collect the results, we're looking more at the quality of the assessment, at the quality of performance assessment. And we know that the student thinking levels that are in those assessments are much higher, by and large, than some of the other assessments that are used. And so we're seeing gains in student achievement, and we believe that there's some kind of a blend between what we're getting from the performance-based assessment and what we're doing with the study on the regular standardized measures.
And that's actually a great segue into kind of what we're doing and we actually look at it in multiple ways. For example, our kindergarten through third grade, we do a value-added assessment using the MAP, NWA MAP scores, and being able to use that in their primary MAP and really doing a growth analysis with those students. Now, we test our third grade students using the PASS test or our state accountability test. However, without having previous data, the variability is too wide, so we do not use that. But third through eighth, we connect to the core subjects. And then in high school, we use, with our state report card system, we use the growth measures as it relates to end of course tests, longitudinal passage we call it HSAP, which is our high school exit exam, first time passage rate, and then graduation rate, and then longitudinal graduation rate. So we use a lot of those, and we use growth measures for that. What we do is our teachers who teach core subjects in that regard they receive 40% of their bonus based on their classroom observations or classroom evaluations, as you've heard about the rubric. 30% of their bonus would be received through their individual value-added scores, and 30% would be received through their overall school value-added. And the rationale behind that is, whereas performance pay has always been tagged to building competition, your performance-based compensation will actually increase if your school increases. So therefore, as you're working together with your neighbor to help them increase, so does your performance-based compensation. Mm-hmm. So it builds collegiality rather than competition in that regard. And then the other teachers, for example, are related arts teachers. When we look at those teachers, they have the option to link to specific subjects. For example, we have an art teacher in one of the elementary schools that links to fourth grade math. While she teaches art, she is working on the fourth grade concepts in math, and therefore she links to the value added of those students in math, and then it follows that model. Otherwise, they will receive what we call a 50-50 split, where 50% of their compensation will come from their classroom observation and 50% will come from their overall school value added, as we know that they're vital to the school being successful and similar in that regard. So there are a lot of different variables in a lot of different ways that we work together with the schools and the districts and the principals to be able to ensure that everyone has the ability to receive that compensation.
One thing to follow up on that, one of the most useful parts of the report are the appendices, which there's a table on page 34 that lays out what each of these districts have done in different ways to address these issues. And then Dennis's, the system that he just described is laid out in the appendix. So I know that's a lot of information coming at you very quickly, but we thought that would be helpful to districts and localities trying to implement some of these things. So other questions?
Good morning. My name is David Schlein. I'm with the National Education Association. And I'd like you to talk a little more about your use of the value-added measures. As I'm sure you're all aware, groups such as the National Academies of Science have come out and issued recommendations that value-added measures not be used in high-stakes decisions such as pay or discipline because of problems such as transparency, bias that has to be adjusted for, problems with missing data. And so I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you're dealing with some of these issues that have been identified.
I'm happy to speak to that again. I promise I won't be the first one in on every question. In North Carolina, we use SAS's EVOS model. I'm sure most everyone's familiar with Bill Sanders and Gene Rivers. Also built into the implementation of Mission Possible, we have included a data quality plan. And in that data quality plan, it describes how we are very transparent about the processes that we use to link students to teachers so that we're feeding good data into that EVOS system before we even create individual teacher value-added data reports. All of our teachers every year get the opportunity to review their student data to say, okay, this student doesn't belong in my linkage because this student didn't attend enough days of school in order for their scores to be valid. This student didn't take the typical state end of course, end of grade test. They don't belong linked to my data. The student was moved midway through the year to an alternative school. And so the teachers, in essence, get the chance to scrub that data clean before it even gets fed into that regression equation that calculates what their value-added data is. And because we have instituted that practice, there's been an increased amount of trust in the data and in the results. The other thing that we have done is wrapped a lot of education and discussion around value-added data and taught teachers how to interpret that data, taught teachers to know what it does and, more importantly, what it does not tell you. And we have the conversation about the balance between achievement data and growth data and how without both, you're really not looking at a full picture. And our teachers now have a firm understanding of how to look at that achievement data and why that's important because you're raising the overall achievement of your students, but to also attend to the fact that each student needs to make growth every year and needs to make more than 1 year of growth every year if they're behind. And there are, I would say this, there are many value-added data models across the country. I think that ours has the full confidence of our teachers, and I think that they view it as a process with integrity and they value the feedback that their individual value-added teacher reports give them.
I think from a state perspective, we've had that conversation multiple times. And one of the things that we really have honed in on from our state team is the fact that you must use multiple points of data. If you use one point of data as the deciding factor for anything, it's detrimental. So in that regard, in using value-added to remove a teacher and only value-added is extremely opposite of what we believe. In using that value-added piece as one key indicator, along with classroom observations, along with knowledge and responsibilities for those teachers as it relates to those decisions. But we've also talked about and really generated a model for mentoring based on the data. Based on, and again, we also use the SAS model. And with that, with the reports that we get then become the first indicator for a mentoring model. And here's what the data says. Let's identify some areas for professional growth, and we link the professional growth to the teachers to that to allow them a chance and opportunity for growth. And then the second piece to that is ensuring that everyone understands what the model is, and we do presentations consistently so that there is that knowledge of how to use that piece to be able to identify areas of growth and areas of strength. The last piece of that is the performance-based compensation is that we never use it to detract anything from their pay. Their salary is their salary and is not part of their salary schedule. It is above and beyond their salary schedule. So therefore, in that regard, we do not use value added as a punitive measure, but more as a portion of an opportunity for additional compensation.
I just wondered if Mike or Claudia could speak a little bit to how value added's, viewed as from a teacher's perspective or a principal's perspective, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, from a teacher's perspective, I think that teachers, when they were discussing about the percentages of what is considered for what teachers call payout, it is an idea of this community of teachers working together. It's not just based on like just we were third to fifth grade last year. We had the tests in those grades. This year we added sixth grade, and we're adding one grade every year. But the kindergarten to second grade teachers feel that they are part of this whole process for our school, because if they're being, if their teaching is high quality, then their students are going to score higher, and then it'll make a difference when they get up to third, fourth, and fifth grade. So then the teachers just see it as this whole component of teachers working together to be able to get those scores to move up. Because of that, when we think of payout, I haven't really heard any teachers thinking of who has more, did you get more? Oh, it's because you had these students, I didn't have those students. There's not that kind of competition that I've heard discussed before, even when I was working in the school district. And performance pay was mentioned a few times and from other districts, and the talk had come up, and a lot of the teachers didn't feel that they wanted it when I worked for the school district. But now in our school, it's more of like, oh, we need to work harder in this area. Kindergarten and to second grade has cluster meetings, which is when we have this professional development time, which is once a week, and then the upper grades have a different cluster meeting where we focus on a different area. And in those meetings, we're talking about the same things, but just making sure that it's modified for the students in those grades. So together, teachers don't feel this sense of, like it's just me by myself, but you're at the same time, you're still working on the things that you need to work on as an individual teacher. So then put together, this payout is looked upon as, something to look forward to, and it's based on how you did individually and as a school, not in a negative sense. I guess that's the best way I can explain it.
In my school, we do work as a team. The key is that we also have a specials cluster, and in specials cluster, they're working on things that they can help the general school. So this year in our specials cluster, we're working on thinking and problem solving. When we look at the value-added scores, it's from all the grade levels, but the main grade levels that get the value-added and the classroom student achievement are pre-K through third grade. We use the tax test from fourth through sixth grade because we have data to show. In third grade, we don't have the data. But it's basically pretty, I guess I can say it's like they don't think about the compensation part of it. They think about how can we grow? How can we get to where we need to be? When I look at the payouts now are pretty equalized. In the first years that we did it, there were big differences in the payout because one teacher would be better than the other. One of the things that we've looked at on our leadership team is how to get ourselves to get past a 3. In TAP, 3 is considered proficient and good, or actually 2.5 is considered good. Our school was at about 3.2, 3.25, and we wanted to go up to about 3.5. So we're looking at that and how do we get all our teachers to improve and get better. And so basically that's how it all works, but they don't think about the money part or the compensation part as much. I ask teachers to come see me individually to talk about their compensation, and you gotta realize I've got 55 teachers. Only 4 teachers came to see me. They're not worried about that part as much. They accept it, they want the money and so forth, but they know that they're learning, and the learning of the kids is the most important part.
Hi, I'm Jillian Cohen-Boyer. I'm at the U.S. Department of Education. I just was wondering about the average age of teachers. I understand that they are being retained longer, but do the teachers who tend to be in these systems tend to be younger, or is it a broad range?
I look at that because most of my teachers are between 3 to 5 years of teaching. when I look at the years of service in my school, I have the most years of service. I've got 33. I do have some older people who come in and help who have 35 years, but they're on contract work. The majority of my teachers are basically between 3 to 5 years. I have a few that may have 10 years. At my school, the ones who were there before, I counted up, I think there are 10 people total. About 4 of them are teachers, and they have about 7 to 8 years of experience.
In our district, we have everything from teachers who have 35 years of experience that are participating in these performance-based pay programs to people that have just walked in the door. So it's the full range. We don't have, there's no real division between newer teachers that are involved in this and not in our system.
And we see the same thing in Algiers. Most of our teachers, I would say, are anywhere from 4 to 7 years, but we do have quite a bit of teachers as well who are very seasoned, 25, 30 years. And the blends that we're seeing in the schools is that typically our more successful schools have about 20 to 25% of very seasoned teachers that help to serve as mentors and so forth for our regular teachers as well, the newer teachers.
And in Mission Possible, we've seen a shift of a high percentage of teachers in that 1 to 3 years to a greater percentage of teachers in 4 to 10, even up to 15 years. And that's through internal redistribution of teachers transferring from one school into a Mission Possible school. And we actually have a lot of teachers from surrounding districts that have transferred into our Mission Possible schools, attracted by the higher pay incentives. But then we still have to do the work to keep them there, and we are doing that. So we've seen a shift in experience and in degrees, teachers holding board certification, teachers holding multiple certifications. So I think overall the quality of the candidates that we have in our schools has shifted in our favor, and that's one of the things I know we're looking at in this newest TIF grant as well.
I think at our school, we've had a lot more younger teachers at our school, somewhere between like 4 to 10 years of experience teaching. But I was thinking about last year, we had about 5 brand new teachers, first-year teachers at our school. The great thing about that is that they come in knowing that this is the program we use once again, and so many of them were excited about that. They were excited about the opportunity to come in and not just get the experience of teaching their first year, but really getting to know what is good teaching. And looking at the rubric, we let them know what it's about. We have a training before the school year starts where you get into the rubric once again and talk about a lot of different strategies that work in classrooms, and the new teachers really benefited from that. We had a teacher who started last year, first-year teacher. He's with Teach for America, and he is our youngest teacher, and he started off struggling his first year with a lot of lower scores, and this year he was featured at Philly TAP's website as a teacher that's made a lot of growth, and he just had an observation where he scored mostly 3s and some 4s. So that's a huge jump for him, and he's really thankful for a lot of the support and professional development that's really high quality professional development. I don't ever feel that in our school if it feels like this is a waste of time, why are we doing this? There's a real purpose for why we're doing everything.
And based on our 2007-2008 data that we did a significant analysis on, our average teaching was about 8.7 years of experience throughout the state.
Other questions?
Hi, I'm Robin Chait with the Center for American Progress. I've heard from program administrators of other performance pay programs that the biggest impacts of the performance pay program was on the recruitment of more effective new teachers rather than on improving the instructional practice of the teachers that are already there. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that, if you found that as well.
Well, I guess I can. I have had to get master teachers, had to get people replaced because the district will take my teachers and move them into principal or assistant principal or campus reading specialist. So I went outside the district and asked the district to bring in new people to interview, and what I find is we get quality people who come in. They may not necessarily come into my program, but what happens is they go into the district, because once we interview them and we see their skills, we realize they're a good candidate for the whole district. So a lot of times we recruit people that way. Also find that people want to be in a TAP school, so they will come and recruit. Our district is a very good district. We've got 41 elementary schools, and all the elementary schools are either recognized or exemplary. So people would like to come to our schools, but then when we talk to them, like, we tell them exactly what we're doing, and they want to get into those schools, and they come and ask me, can they come into our school? And if I have a position, I will try to get them in and interview them. So we do recruit other people from outside the district.
I think in our district, it certainly has helped to recruit. Our turnover rates have dropped dramatically, but that wasn't the primary thing. What has happened in our district is that people want to come not only for the money, but they want to come into those Excel schools because one of our key results has been collaboration and the teachers working together. And the teachers know that they're going to be supported. And as a result, we believe that the collaboration, teachers talking to teachers about student data and about what to do next instructionally, has made the student achievement gains go up, and it also has made for much happier people, much happier teachers, because they know they're not alone. And we know that in these professions, having been a teacher and a principal, there are days when you can feel incredibly alone. But with a collaborative model where professional learning communities are used, like what we're using, or we're all looking at the school-wide data in order to make all the scores go up for the whole school, all of a sudden we're a team. And for some people, that's the first time. For many years, they were behind one classroom door with the door shut. So I think that it's well beyond just recruitment.
Are there additional questions? Yeah.
Hi, David Schlein again from NEA. We have found that the programs that the number one reason why programs don't continue on is lack of funding. That you may get a grant, like a TIF grant, but then when the grant ends, the program can't be funded anymore. What actions are you taking in your districts to deal with the funding issue once the grant is gone?
We're starting that process now. Our TIF grant will be expiring June 30, 2012. One of the things that Algier started to do before TAP actually started was start planning some of the funds that was used to support a mentor teacher, master teacher. We've now begun to better align the various funding sources out there and to prioritize within our schools what are those functions and activities that you deem are very important, and how do we continue with that. We can't be all things anymore. We have to work much more strategically, but we do see that the performance-based pay, the continuance with TAP are two priorities that we want to continue. And so that means really going in and channeling all of our resources to support those endeavors and to still have them connected with student achievement. For our principals, we're starting that process now. We believe that over the next year to 18 months, well, we'll certainly have to have another plan in place, but we believe that we have the resources available through our current funding streams in order for it to continue. It's just working more strategically and smart about aligning those together.
I think I can echo that too. We're looking at alignment of resources and finding out where are we getting the biggest bang for our buck, so to speak. What is it that's working? And those are the things that will be funded. So for example, we have a couple of other performance pay compensation systems that we're probably going to be restructuring somewhat in order to be more in alignment with what we found to be successful with this particular one. And we feel that that's going to be certainly a part of it. But we also know that we have to have a good base salary for teachers, because that has always been an issue. But we also know that the public does not want to pay teachers for some reason. They don't want to pay teachers the way we think they ought to be paid. And so it seems like this is a strategy that we'll be able to use to pay teachers more equitably with other professions if we look at what the public deems most important. For example, student achievement, teachers learning along, taking on leadership roles, taking on positions in schools that no one else wants to take. Those kinds of things, if that's how we're going to raise teacher salaries, then so be it. I mean, maybe that's finally the way we'll be able to have a more livable wage for the teaching profession.
Dennis, would you speak a little bit to this?
Some of the things in South Carolina that we've done is because from the state perspective, we've been able to really get press, if you will, that we've been able to talk with our legislators. We've been able to talk with our state school board. There is one bill in the House right now that is looking at rearranging some of the education funding specific to performance-based compensation because of what the data is saying. And similarly, that we're looking at the data and saying what's working and what's not. We're putting a lot of money into this and we're not seeing the student achievement gains, so can we shift and move to something more than that? We have another bill right now that's in committee that's specific to that. And then as we change over with a new governor and new state superintendent, one of the things is looking at where our funding is going. So I think the change is actually going to help really redesign that. And then one of my job responsibilities is to work with the district office and the district finance offices across the state to say, here are funding streams that you currently have that are capable of ensuring the sustainability of this. And the way we actually built our TIF grant, all of our TIF grants was an increasing level of sustainability and an increasing level of sustained funding from the school district. So all of the school districts that are currently involved in TIF have taken on up to a 50% match already to be able to look at that. And there are 2 school districts in particular that are full school districts that have asked me to come talk within the next couple months to help redesign their budget so as they know TIF is going away, that they will secure funding for the remainder of it because they've seen such significant results.
I think we have time for maybe one more question, and then we will wrap up if there is one. If not, I'll give our panelists one last chance to take a crack at this so they can have the last word on this. We really appreciate your time. We really think this is an important time to be having this conversation. Your questions were thoughtful and meaningful. But the last question I'll just throw out and any one of you can answer. But how do your systems allow great teachers to become the catalysts for improving teaching in a way that can sustain improvement over time? And so, ultimately you guys you've talked about this in various ways, but kind of just to close our time together, how are you using your great teachers and principals to drive change for kids in your districts? Just a last word on that. Any of you that wants to take that would be great.
I think one of the things that I've already mentioned is the collaborative element. Opening up our doors, opening up the doors of the principal's office, opening up the doors of the classrooms, and working together for the greater good of the whole entire student body, looking at data very specifically. And then, even more importantly, trying to figure out what is it that we need to do in the classroom to improve that data, to improve that student achievement. I think we've been looking for quite some years now about the diagnosis. We have been analyzing data, analyzing data, analyzing data. Oh, this is terrible, or oh, this is great, whatever it is. But I'm wondering how much focus we've spent on the prescription. What is it that needs to happen in the classroom? What is it that lesson needs to look like, and how do we need to disaggregate the students and really work on specific things? And I know many of the colleagues here at the table are doing that very thing. So I think how we make better teachers is we combine incentive with professional development, looking at data and looking at lessons that work and watching children grow. Because we know that teachers, that's their #1 goal. The biggest smile comes across a teacher's face when the student is achieving. And so we know that alone is a motivating factor. And couple that with the compensation that's going to let them live a lifestyle that's just a little bit better than what they might have expected as a teacher. I think the combination of that is going to sustain us in the future.
Thanks, Roseanne. All right, feel free to stick around if you have any questions, but I think that'll do it for today. Thanks for coming.